Hi, I was sat at home the other day. We're all doing a lot of that at the moment, and it flagged up on my Facebook feed that it was 50 years anniversary of Black Sabbath's debut album. That had happened a month before, but then it got me thinking. Wow, it's 40 years since 1980, and 1980 is probably one of the most momentous years. It is the most momentous year in the history of hard rock, heavy metal, heavy rock, whatever you want to call it. So what I did was I researched Wikipedia, various sources, and decided to just go through and feature do a bit of a patter about every album that came out that month, and what I was doing and how the effect it had on me and the culture. Just a little preamble. I'm just turning over my sheet, a few notes here. Before starting, it was basically after sort of the mid 70s, punk comes in at 76. 77. This period is seen as a lean time for what would later be classed as heavy metal. So your Deep Purples, your Uriah Heeps, your Black Sabbaths are generally having fairly lean times. Obviously, Judas Priest released Sad Wings of Destiny. But it's a kind of lean period, 76, 77. And then what happens in 78, the sort of stirrings begin of a bit of a revival, kind of on the back of the punk thing. Basically, punk kind of sort of doesn't die off, but it dies off a little bit into 78. But you get like post punk coming along. So it opens up a little bit for a few bands to start making waves a bit. UFO do their Obsession album, which does pretty well. You have AC/DC doing Power Age. They're featured on Rock Goes to College around that time. Maybe it's the year before. And again, that starts to make a bit of an impact. You've also got in 78, sorry, Van Halen's debut album, which again they make a big impact on Black Sabbath's Never Say Die tour, and that album goes massive in the States. So there's little stirrings there in 78. In 79, Motorhead released two albums. Early in 79 they released Overkill, late in 79 they released Bomber, and they are featured on Top of the Pops, and that's such a big thing at the time. When you get to see a band on Top of the Pops, it helps spread their profile. Also, DC were on Top of the Pops with Rock and Roll Damnation. That's 78. Other thing, back end of 79, Sound starts reporting about the new Wobbum. Rainbow released Down to Earth. Again, you've got some heavy music on Top of the Pops. Backtracking, early 79, Judas Priest are on Top of the Pops to Take on the World. They also released the Sound Alive album, Unleashed in the East, and along with UFO Strangers in the Night, these two albums from 79 that people will go to and act as kind of best ofs, an introduction to those bands. AC/DC also do Highway to Hell. I think the key thing here is DC as well. It's setting up for what will happen in 1980. AC/DC is probably the biggest rock band in the world in 1979. Highway to Hell goes gold in America, and eventually it achieves platinum status. AC/DC are very much the coming band. They've built on all the hard work they put in prior to that. Just checking on my notes. Yeah, Love Drive by the Scorpions. That's February 25th, 1979, and Van Halen 2. Also March 23rd, 1979. So classic Scorpions album again, setting the stage. And Van Halen 2, really good sophomore effort, and Van Halen doing their own gigs over in this country. So, like I say, there's a lot of stuff going on. I'll just quickly mention, obviously, Motorhead achieved that thing where they produced two classic albums in the same year. Very few bands have ever achieved that. Judas Priest do it with Stained Class and Killing Machine. Uriah Heep with Demons and Wizards and The Magician's Birthday. So no mean feat there. So yeah, that's the kind of preamble. That's just everything's getting really. There's the stirrings of 78, and then things really come to born in 79, and then once the Christmas period is over, the first albums start to hit the shops, and the first one to come out is a little inauspicious for me. It's the first album by UFO of the Tonka Chapman era, and it's, according to records, it's January the 8th, 1980, and that's No Place to Run. Now, I didn't really hear that album at the time. I got it a few years ago. I'd heard tracks off it, but it doesn't do a lot for me. I think the production's poor. I don't think the songs are there. I like Young Blood. The title track's good. But the year after, UFO would do their best album of the Tonka Chapman era with The Wilder, Willing and the Innocent, and that's, you know, the next best thing to the Michael Schenker era. On that same day, there's also Sheer Greed by Girl. Where Girl fit in with the New Wobbin thing is strange. They're not a New Wobbin band, but the kind of the glam, proto-glam metal, obviously influenced by Bowie and The Sweet. The Sheer Greed album's pretty good. Hollywood Tease was a minor hit. I think Phil Collins of Def Leppard probably poo-poos any kind of metal influence, but you know, if you're into rock, heavy rock, hard rock, metal at the time, you may have well have bought the Sheer Greed album. I've heard it once. I never bought it at the time. Had a cool album cover, but quite interesting. That just kind of first out of the traps, and it did pretty well. The first big release is the next week. It's January the 14th, and that is this album. Now, I should say this. In order for me to see what I'm doing, I've got to put it on Beauty Face, and that means that the album cover will appear backwards. I've tried it the other way, but I just can't see what I'm doing. And I could do this on my tablet, but it won't record as long, and the photographic quality and the sound's not as good. So you will now see this backwards, but it is Permanent Waves by Rush. So a lot of people will know this album. I didn't have the album at the time, but we all knew the Spirit of Radio. I'm sure Legs and Co. danced to Spirit of Radio on Top of the Pops. I could be wrong. Maybe that's just some false memory of rock. But a classic song, Spirit of Radio. Also on here you got Free Will, which is a really cool tune. Entree New, interesting track, different strings. This is a transitional album for Rush. Basically, after Hemispheres, that was the sort of optimum of their prog era, and for many, Hemispheres is their greatest album of their first few albums. Then they still have progressive elements on this, of course, but they're starting to write kind of shorter, more commercial songs, obviously Spirit of the Radio being a case in point. The next year they will do their next sort of masterpiece, Moving Pictures. But you need Permanent Waves to get to Moving Pictures. And you see that with other bands. Judas Priest need Point of Entry to get Screaming for Vengeance, and they need Killing Machine to get to British Steel. So, very successful album for Rush. I think it was top 10 in this country, and top 10 in America, platinum album. A really fondly remembered album. And that's the first heavy hitter of 1980. February, I do not have any albums from February. Some people out there, you may know more albums than I do. February 29th is Departure by Journey. Now, quite an interesting one, Journey, not a heavy metal band. Heavy rock, don't know, definitely got hard rock elements. You class them as an AOR band, but Journey are pretty hard rocking. And the thing is, if you got a denim jacket back in 1980, you could have patches of all sorts of different bands on the back. And that might include a band like Rush, progressive rock, really. It might include Journey, but the point is it's still all part of that heavy metal, hard rock family. So the Departure album's got Any Way You Want It on. It's also got a track, I think, called Line of Fire, which is a great rocker. Very successful album for Journey, triple platinum in the States. Would have got a bit of traction over here. And that's one of the February releases. The other one is Conquest by Uriah Heep. Again, Uriah Heep, probably class them as heavy rock with some progressive elements. This is quite an AOR album for them, but it's not fondly remembered. It's the only album with John Sloman on vocals. And he didn't have a particularly successful tenor with him, and that Ken Hensley left the band. I never heard the album. I do remember going round my brother's mate's house when I was a kid, and he had a copy of Conquest by Uriah Heep. He's got quite a cool cover. It's got the reconstruction of the raising of the flag on Iwo Jima from World War II. But a lot of people rate it as one of the very worst Uriah Heep albums. So, Uriah Heep couldn't get a lot of traction. One of the things that happens in 1980 is bands that have been around a while can get traction again on the back of the new album and the newer bands coming out. Uriah Heep do get that later on in 82 with an album called Abominog, which does very well for them. But Conquest wasn't the album to do that. So things have started quietly. What happens next is things start to hot up. I just need to rearrange my order. This is not the first new album to come out. The first new album, big new album of 79, was Saxon's debut album and Samson's Survivors album. but neither of those albums did very much for them. But his next band came out on March the 14th, and it's this, On Through the Night by Def Leppard. Always loved this album cover, and it's just got that great Def Leppard logo. So let's get down to brass tacks with that. I heard tracks off this at the time. I knew Rock Brigade, and I would have heard Get Your Rocks Off, because they used to get played on Tommy Vance quite a bit. Sort of controversial album this, because the band don't like it. Joe Elliott will slag off this album any chance he gets, but I know there's a lot of people out there who really rate this album. And I think the reason why Joe Elliott doesn't like it is because the production's not as good, and obviously Def Leppard had better crafted songs later on. But it is a metal album. It's as heavy metal as other New Wobham albums, and it's as heavy metal in its lyrical content and its Americanized aspiration. They get criticised for Hello America, Def Leppard, but you've got bands like Saxon singing songs like Freeway Mad, and that's the things with the bands of that time. They write songs about America even though they haven't been there. It's just that feeling of aspiration of wanting to, get to that country that's on your TV screen, and where a lot of bands and music and mythology comes from. This album, you got Rock Brigade, I think that's a really cool track. Hello America, Sorrow Is a Woman, that's not very good. It Could Be You, Satellite, they're good tracks. When the Walls Came Tumbling Down, that's got a kind of Rush style preamble, I think. Again, a little bit proggy. Wasted, good tune. Rocks Off, Get Your Rocks Off, good tune. It Doesn't Matter, that's alright. Answer to the Master Overture. Produced by Tom Allen. The production's not great, but I think this album made number 15 or number 18 in the UK charts. Leppard, caught the timing just right, and they'd had support slots of AC/DC and Sammy Hagar. So, they got out of the gate quickly. They got the backlash at Reading later that year, and that kind of affected them for a long time in this country, unfairly so. The High and Dry album did good, but not as good as this. And then Pyromania kind of went top 30, but obviously went absolutely stratospheric in America, and an innovative album that, invented the sort of hair scene, really, in a lot of ways. But a good solid debut from Def Leppard, and a true sort of New Wobham album, really, albeit a bit more polished. Next to March the 25th, I will get one out in a sec, but another album that comes out is Progressions of Power by Triumph. So Triumph was a band that was on my radar and my brother's radar, and we had Just a Game by Triumph and the Progressions of Power album. Always loved that. I Live for the Weekend track. Pretty heavy album. Triumph could really rock when they wanted to. The year after, 1980, they appeared at the Port Vale Festival, the Heavy Metal Holocaust Festival in Port Vale. So they had a good following over here, and they were a hard-rocking Canadian band. And Progressions of Power is a good album. And that came out March the 25th, as well as this, which is Women and Children First by Van Halen. This is my first, not introduction musically to Van Halen. I'll show you the back of the CD there. But it was, when you went through the record shops, that was the first Van Halen thing you saw. Also, at that time, Van Halen, Warner Brothers reissued 7-inch singles or repackaged tracks to reintroduce to the new metal audience. So Van Halen, there was a Running with the Devil single with Dead or Alive on the B-side, and David Lee Roth was wearing like a yellow catsuit, looked fantastic. They also reissued Montrose Bad Motor Scooter and Space Station number 5 at that time. And then that was it. There was all this back catalogue that could be activated, that people could listen to, and a lot of us went back to Sabbath and Purple and stuff like that, because we'd never heard it before, but all the bands we were listening to, the new bands, were well into that stuff. Anyway, Women and Children's First, interesting album. Obviously, you got Van Halen, one absolute classic. Van Halen 2, good sophomore effort. This one, I always liked it as a kid. I like it more now. A lot of people, it's their favourite Van Halen album. I think it only has one sort of defining track that kind of steps out of the album often, and that's And the Cradle Will Rock, which is the single. The other tracks are true album tracks, and it works very well as an album. It's really gnarly, it's down and dirty, it's a bit kind of grungy. You got Everybody Wants Some, fantastic. Romeo Delight, awesome track. Take Your Whiskey Home, and one of my faves on the end, In a Simple Rhyme, and As Fools Could This Be Magic. It's a really strong record. Not much kind of great Eddie Van Halen fretwork on it. His solos a little, don't stand out as much as the first two albums. But he's doing different things on this. He uses a keyboard, interestingly, on A Cradle Rock. And it's just a proper sort of contained album. It's kind of like their Master Reality, I suppose. Although Master Reality, I think, is a better third album from Sabbath in a way. That's amazing. But, it's just kind of pretty hard-hitting. And it takes a bit of getting into, but it's a rich album. And that was their contribution in 1980, very good. Next one, March the 31st, this comes out. Interesting, a bridging album. And you'll see why when I put it up. It's Animal Magnetism by the Scorpions. Why a bridging album? Well, it comes between Love Drive and Blackout. Now, they're established classics for many people. Blackout is the greatest, Love Drive is the greatest Scorpions album, closely followed by Blackout. So this album's always been the one in the middle. And after that, there was Love at First Sting, and I think, we all kind of thought, Love at First Sting's better, Animal Magnetism's not as good. But as time's gone on, I think this is a really strong record. Fantastic album cover. I'll just show you that again. I love it. And we had this when we were kids with my brothers. I think we had it on cassette, so I know this album quite well. Make It Real, Don't Break My Promises, brilliant guitar solo of Matthias. You got Hold Me Tight, which is a cool track. 20th Century Man, not quite as good, but I like it. Beautiful Ballad, Lady Starlight. Then side 2, like I'm going from the vinyl here, that opened up with Falling in Love, which is a great rocker. Then you've probably got the weakest track on the album, Only a Man. Then the classic The Zoo. And then it finishes with Animal Magnetism, which is one of the darkest, heaviest things the band ever did. It's a good, really self-contained album. None of these albums outstay their welcome, as the CD era progresses. Albums get too long. All these albums, they had to fit in. They couldn't be any longer than about 42 minutes. So most of these albums are under 40 minutes. They have 8, 9, 10 tracks and are really well balanced. So that's March. There's probably maybe some other stuff coming out in March that people would correct us on. I'm going to go in April now. What I'm going to do is just get the smaller release of April out of the way. I don't know the date of it because the next 4 albums are going to show you it's a seismic moment in art, basically. But Magnum Marauder was one of the albums was released in April, according to records. Marauder by Magnum, so they did Kingdom of Madness, which got them noticed, and then the Magnum 2 album didn't do very well. So what Jet Records did was release Marauder. It was a live album. Just to kind of get them out there. And it's probably a good move. Magnum, it certainly made them kind of, Magnum, they're worth checking out. I don't think the album did great for them, but it kept them going. And later on they would do Chase the Dragon 11th Hour, and then the classic, The Storyteller's Night. So, April the 3rd, it's just flagged up tonight on Facebook. I don't know when I'll share this. It's the 40th anniversary of this. Wheels of Steel by Saxon. Obviously, again, apologies for being the wrong way around, but it's the only way to do it. My memories of the album, my brother bought it on cassette soon after it came out, and I remember being in the garden at home. I lived in the countryside, and he had batteries in his tape player. He had like a Pi mono thing, I think, or maybe he had his Bush by then, I can't remember. But anyway, we just propped it up against a tree in the garden. And I just remember the motorcycle noise coming out, and it just went into Motorcycle Man. It was just like, wow. It's such a great record. Motorcycle Man, Stand Up and Be Counted. Interesting fact with that, that's the same riff as Tush and No Class by Motorhead. But it's a great track in its own right. 747, Needs No Introduction. Wheels of Steel, classic. That track appeared on Top of the Pops around this time, and that same night, if you look at the video, the footage of that, the set is exactly the same when Priest play Living After Midnight, and my feeling is that Priest and Saxon both appeared on the same Top of the Pops. How incredible is that? It just wouldn't happen now, not without Top of the Pops. Now you got Freeway Mad, fantastic drum intro by Pete Gill. One of those songs where bands sing about driving fast in America, even though they can't drive fast and they've never been to America. But that's a great thing about metal. It's got that fantasy aspiration. It's projecting where you want to be. it's taking you out of the mundane, the humdrum of life. Then great album, great deep cut, See the Light Shining. I've actually seen them play this live. Brilliant track, and it changes tack halfway through. It changes tempo and groove. Brilliant. Street Fighting Gang, that's a great song. It's one I really enjoy. It's got a good call and response riff at the start. Susie Hold On, probably the weakest track on an album, but a nice commercial track. Used to scare us a bit, the lyrics about someone dying. When I was a little kid, it was like, Bon Scott had just died, and I was kind of like, oh, that's weird, young people dying, or people who aren't that old, and I think I found that quite confusing as a little kid. And then one of my all-time favourite Saxon tracks, just what Biff Byford does so well. He does these historical action lyrics, and he just throws you into the trenches and going over the top with the song Machine Gun. Maybe he's talking about World War II, I'm not sure. We did have Gatling guns in World War One, I think. It's a great track. It's just full on. Just a classic album, one of the great heavy metal albums, and one of the essential metal albums that people have to have. Next up, it's April the 14th. You're just not going to believe this, according to records. How awesome a day this must have been for people who had, £8 in their pocket. If they've only got £4, they're going to have to make a choice, because I think these albums came out on probably a £3.99 introductory price, but I'll just show them they both came out this day. There's that, not the original cover. And then there's that, British Steel and Iron Maiden's debut album. Holy mother of whatever. A Maiden's debut album, just for some people still, not only one of the great debut albums, but still, for some people, their best album. I think these days I probably lean towards Killers. Always loved the Diano era. Again, my brother bought this album. We had it on cassette. It's pretty much top from start to finish. The last two tracks, I think, are the weaker ones, Charlotte the Harlot and Iron Maiden. When Iron Maiden gets, dragged out of gigs because it's called Iron Maiden, it's a really catchy track, it's an anthem, but I just think the ones before it, the first 5 tracks, Prowler, Remember Tomorrow, Running Free, Fountain of the Opera, Transylvania, off the bat are awesome. The CD edition here, I've got Sanctuary on here, but that wasn't on the original vinyl, it was 4 tracks aside. But perhaps an unusual deep cut was Strange World. Back in the early 90s, I went to see Paul Di'Anno and his band at the Riverside, and he played this track, and it was really like, oh wow, what a tune. Production, yeah, it lets it down. Then again, maybe it doesn't. It's just got a rawness. I don't think Steve Harris's bass isn't captured quite right. The balance, when he teamed up with Martin Birch, everything sounded a lot better. But just a great album. Remember Running Free, they played live on Top of the Pops. It was just awesome. And then you got British Steel. I'm not going to go on about this album too much because I'll be going on about this on another video. It's a classic. It's one of the defining albums of 1980. It's probably the album that sums up metal more than anything in 1980. If you had to decide, okay, pick me one album that says what was heavy metal in 1980, I think it's British Steel. Like I say, we'll talk about that in more detail on another thing. The next album, weird. I saw a picture of this band when I was a little kid, and then when I heard this track, it was kind of like, oh, that's weird. I never expected the singer to sound like that. That was because the picture I saw was with Ozzy Osbourne in the band, and the singer on this next album is Ronnie James Dio, is of course Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath. I'll get like the sort of key point over about this. I think if you had to pick the best thing of 1980, like you said, what is the best thing done in metal in 1980, I would say it's side 1 of this album. Side one of this album is fucking incredible. Side 2's awesome as well, but side 1's just so bloody perfect. It contains 3 of the greatest tracks in all of heavy metal: Neon Nights, Children of the Sea, and Heaven and Hell. But the third track's a real killer. It's called Lady Evil, and I absolutely love it, and it's as good as anything that they did. My theory with this lineup of Sabbath has evolved over time, but here it is in a nutshell. You take the greatest rhythm section in heavy metal, you take the guitarist who invents heavy metal, and you put them with the greatest heavy metal singer. What happens? You're going to get great heavy metal. Yeah, side 2, Wishing Well, Die Young, brilliant. Tails off a bit on towards the end. You got Walk Away and Lonely Is the Word. Walk Away is a catchy track, but that's the sort of filler track on the album. Then there's Lonely Is the Word, a tune I like more than I used to. It's just, this album just starts so strongly. Neon Nights might be, it's one of the great, if not the greatest, performance by a vocalist in heavy metal. Just the melodies that Dio comes up with. Yeah, just a fantastic album. Funnily enough, I'm not sure we had it when I was young. I heard it, I knew these tracks, but we had the Mob Rules album later on. But what an amazing month April was in the history of the music we love. Going to May, I don't have any albums of the albums from May, but here's the 3 albums that were released in May that I'm aware of. May the 30th, May the 20th, sorry, was Kiss Unmasked. May the 30th, Ready and Willing by Whitesnake, and G-Force, Gary Moore's project. G-Force, I used to hear that, White Knuckles, Rockin' and Rollin', serious guitar on that. I've never heard the Unmasked album. Weird story, I went to Keswick with my family one summer afternoon, one summer's day, and with my auntie was there as well, and I went in the Boots in Keswick, or was Woolworths, one of those, and they had record department, and Unmasked was in there. So I remember looking at the album sleeve, but apparently it's very poppy, but Kiss fans would know more about that. Ready and Willing by Whitesnake, seminal album for Whitesnake at the time. It was a band actually I just missed off on my preamble, 78, 79, Whitesnake, the Love Hunter album. Again, that was an album that kind of set the trap for rock in 1980. But Ready and Willing's got Fool for Your Loving, the title track, Carry a Load, Blind Man. I think that's one of their greatest songs. Again, it's maybe tails off a bit. There's not all the tracks are great on that album. I think I would say Slide It In's a more consistent album. Maybe even Come and Get It. But it's a key album in 1980, and it's a part of the story. You know, Whitesnake aren't a heavy metal band. I think later on they had more metal elements. On Ready and Willing, I describe them as heavy rock. If I had to describe what heavy rock sounds like, I would play someone some Whitesnake. But again, you know, many a denim jacket would have Judas Priest, Saxon and Whitesnake on the back, and it was all part of that thing. Next in June, I don't own any of these albums here, but I'll just pick one out that I think might have come out in June, but I'll just go through a few releases. Scream Dream, Ted Nugent. Love that album at the time. Listening to it now, it is good, it's funny, but you miss Derek St. Holmes, you know, you miss that classic Nugent lineup a bit, but a really good record. Always loved Terminus Eldorado. The last track, really funny. Head On by Samson, that's June 27th. Good solid new Wobbin album. Production lets it down, but there's some good tunes on that. And obviously it introduced the world to Bruce Dickinson, or Bruce, as he was known then. And on June the 30th, you got Demolition by Girls' School. I just remember Race with the Devil. I remember once my dad was driving down to Coventry and he let me listen to the Friday Rock Show in the car, and Race with the Devil was playing. Cool band. You know, they teamed up with Motorhead later in the year, I think for the St. Valentine's Day Massacre EP, and had a top number 5 album with a Hit and Run album the next year. Album comes out June the 14th. Another band that's kind of, you know, metal fans like them, rock fans like them, but they're not metal. But in 1980, they kind of, you know, they were able to carry the wave a bit, and that's Blue Oyster Cult with the Cultosaurus Erectus album. I'm not sure where that's kind of featured in BOC aficionados' top Blue Oyster Cult albums. I think it's pretty highly rated. Always had a cool cover, and you got a cool poster with it. A very important thing in 1980, coloured vinyl, picture discs, free patches, free posters. They always used to put extras in, the record companies, just to try and attract people to buy stuff, you know. Because people would buy stuff. You just buy stuff because you like the album cover and a free patch. But a Cultosaurus Erectus, yeah, it's got some heavy stuff on Marshall Plan, Black Blade. You know, I've got a copy of the album somewhere. The other album, actually June the 2nd, I jumped ahead as I'm a Rebel by Accept. That's their second album. Yeah, Accept don't really make an impact until 1982, the Restless and Wild album. That's when they really hit hard. They're still finding their way. So June's quite an interesting one. I'm not sure this album came out in June, but I've got a feeling it came out in the summer. And that's what's next. I had the track You Got Living, it's by Frank Marino Mahogany Russia, to say this is the Rock Candy remaster, very nice. I had the track You Got Living on the Kilowatts compilation, and that's the first album I ever bought. And I'll come with a compilation. Actually, it's a good time to talk about compilations because there's actually one coming next. But one thing in 1980, all the record labels released compilations as showcases for the bands. I had Kilowatts, that introduced me to Line of Fire by Journey, a couple of Frank Marino tracks. It had Rapid Fire on by Judas Priest, Ario Speedwagon, some quite obscure acts on like Oz and Ray Gomez, and but it was a double album. It was only $4.99, so I had a bit of a trauma when I got that because I was down in Coventry at my auntie's, and I said, "Oh, can we go out and get an album?" And I couldn't decide what to get. It was between the next album I'm going to show you and Kilowatts, and she ended up driving from Coventry all the way to Kenilworth so I could go to Disco Track Records in Kenilworth and buy Kilowatts. Disco Track Records is now a pet shop, I think, but that's those little mom and pop shops, as they call them. But other compilation albums out then was Living Legends, that was Phonogram Vertigo, so you had Def Leppard and Rush on that, and the Sounds did one, and the CBS Sounds album, I can't remember, some of you know that. There's some kind of Heavy Metal Machine with Skull on the front. There was several, and the other famous one, I would say the most famous one, was Axe Attack for us. That was K-Tel. I'm not sure the first one got advertised on TV, but there is an advert for Axe Attack 2 if you go on YouTube. But Axe Attack was a good compilation. I distinctly remember there was a school disco at my primary school, so me and my mate Adrian Brooks made cardboard cutout guitars in the shape of SGs like Angus Young, and I think Adrian had Axe Attack, or someone did, maybe it was a guy called Gordon Johnson, I'm not sure, and we took our copy of Axe Attack down and we played some tracks off it. I think we played Gillan and maybe Frank Marino, but I don't know, and we had our cardboard guitars and pretended we were rocking. So compilation albums are big there, and this is one of the biggest compilations. It's a funny one, this, because we had this album at the time, it's the only, it kind of feels like a real album. It's like, how ABBA Gold is the best ABBA album. I've got the other ABBA albums, but ABBA Gold's great, and it's deep as purple. This was on K-Tel, and you get this for $4.99. Interestingly enough, this is 60 minutes long, so they properly had tight grooves, so imagine the sound quality wasn't that great. Because like I said before, most albums didn't go past the 40-minute mark. But you got 12 tracks on this. And they're just really classic purple tunes. Black Knight, Speaking, Fireball, Strange Kind of Woman, Child in Time, Woman from Tokyo, Highway Star, Space Trucking, Burn and Stormbringer, and The Demon's Eye, and Smoke on the Water. So those are the original 12 tracks. This is a reissue, so you get on this, we get 4 other tracks. One of them I really love is You Keep Moving, the other one is Soldier of Fortune.